son of a bitch.
Will Insomniac Spider-Man 2 make your son gay? Now, bear with us on this one instead of rushing to the comments like my last video that danced around this subject, but Resikin and I will finally be putting this subject to rest despite all the gaslighting certain people try to pull to justify this garbage being in a game that is pretty much inherently geared towards kids by virtue of being a Spider-Man game. With quotes like, oh, some game or other form of media including gay stuff won't affect your kids at all. But I'll have Resikin take the floor with the facts that most people could probably assume.
In psychology, there is a concept known as operationalization. What it basically is defining a term before you start applying it to other things so that everyone is on the same page. I find it to be incredibly useful when dealing with subjective terms such as woke, where not everyone is on the same page concerning its meaning. For example, to me at least, there's a significant difference between the portrayal of Nordic Vikings in a historical TV show as being black and that of a few hobbits, or more specifically Harfoots in a fantasy show being more melanated than some of their other counterparts. Woke actually used to, and still does to a certain degree, have a much different connotation from what it is known for mostly today, in that it was a slang term in the African American community used to describe ideas or people who knew what was truly going on behind the scenes. Knew how to see past false paradigms and glance up at the puppeteers orchestrating the mass corruption that was keeping people down and themselves up, such as the CIA dropping crack and selling weapons to black neighborhoods in the 80s. Ironically enough, that past definition of woke is strikingly akin to what is contemporarily known as the very opposite of it: based. Anyway, that might have once been the case, but it is definitely not what is meant for the most part these days, like when you see lots of YouTubers screaming, kvetching, and making 2-hour videos about it anytime they see a non-white person in a trailer of an upcoming film or game. Okay, back to operationalization. The way that me and Joker define woke, and the way it is mostly understood by people who aren't just full-on bigots using wokeness as an excuse to be bigoted towards an intellectual property's writing or even cast, wokeness to us, simply put, is the disguising and attempted normalization of controversial behaviors or attitudes in media. Essentially the use of shows, films, or games as a Trojan horse to usher in ideas which are often deemed as morally egregious to the masses. Promoting social change through the media is not necessarily a bad thing. Au contraire, almost since the inception of film as a form of media, it has been used to raise awareness surrounding taboo issues such as the racism that blacks had and in many cases have to deal with on a daily basis. By making side or even main characters black, this helped humanize and normalize black people to white audiences, giving them a look into the personal lives of people, many of which were never even around previously. As you wipe the teardrop from your eye, you might ask yourself,
why then? Why are you attacking wokeness? Is this not a beautiful thing?
That's because it isn't all sunshine and roses anymore. Especially since the turn of the 21st century, there's been a major push to normalize not people who happen to be born with a certain complexion, whose skin they wear on their outside and are observed and reacted to in accordance to that for every second of their lives, for better or for worse, but instead a lifestyle decision. Why then is it LGBTP in particular which is being pushed nearly across the entire industry over the last few years? A common low-IQ brain rot take is, oh,
it's 2024, people are just more accepting these days, and we're just stuck in the past.
Well, BC, whatever the fuck it was when God smote Sodom and Gomorrah called, they want their sexual deviancies back. On a more serious note, that is not a good response at all, and is in fact an incredibly lazy and unscientific way of looking at things. There's always a cause and an effect. There is a reason as to why things change. They don't ever happen on their own. There are some things that have historically been taboo, which still are, while the sentiment around other things like race did, at least to a degree, change over time. I'm not going to bother with conspiratorial ideas like there being a war on religion or depopulation agenda, because that isn't the purpose of this video. The cold hard facts all point to one thing, and that is money. After all, it is what makes the world go round. Much like how in politics, politicians are often bribed, encouraged by lobbying organizations with money to vote on certain issues in certain ways, regardless of whether or not that is what they were elected into office for. The same phenomenon also takes place in the world of media, which more often than not is adjacent to politics. It is quite simple actually. There exist these organizations known as Social Impact Entertainment Groups, or SIEs, which function by encouraging scriptwriters and producers into integrating social justice issues such as climate change and LGBTP into sometimes already completed scripts. I myself am not entirely convinced that these scriptwriters and producers are necessarily progressive or even on board with all of the things that their productions push themselves. More likely than not, they just don't really care all that much and see the money offered by SIE organizations such as GLAAD, also known as GLGBTP, legal advocates and defenders, which themselves get their funding from billionaires like George Soros, who himself was actually designated as a global terrorist by the Chinese government due to his efforts at such social programs and change. Ultimately, X leads to Y. Y doesn't ever just drop from the sky, regardless of whether or not we're dealing with media or anything else for that matter. But this itself poses an important question. Why then is Y a problem, especially in a children's game such as Spider-Man? A common phrase made by the defenders of Y in children's media is,
"Seeing gay people won't turn your kid gay."
Me and Joker are actually here to make the argument that it can, and oftentimes does. Humans are inherently social creatures that copy behaviors which they see, especially at a young age when we are the most impressionable. This isn't rocket science or anything. Little boys will fight like the wrestlers they see on TV, and girls will twirl like the princesses they see at balls. As such, it makes a lot of sense that the majority of parents who subscribe to a world religion, or even in China where it is largely atheist, yet homosexuality is frowned upon and even considered to be a mental illness, that they wouldn't want their kids being exposed to such things. Not even being performed by adults, but by children around the age groups of the gamer, being portrayed in an unrealistically normal way, even for Western schools in 2024. It is not that knowing they exist will turn them into that thing. It is the casual, woke normalization of such behaviors, like the portrayal of a guy asking out another guy with their favorite superhero's help, will implicitly put in their mind that this is a behavior worthy of replication.
Yeah, and this socio-political nonsense isn't even exclusive to kids either, as I've seen it decay the general masses, especially in some of the most progressive countries like the United States and Canada, where more chicks become bi due to the social media brain rot they're exposed to, despite those Insomniac black cat on cat relationships having higher divorce rates. I've seen those types of ladies magically increase in recent years due to things being normalized and trendy, I guess, as opposed to it being a decision they actually would have made completely on their own. I even temporarily endured dating some black bussing guy at claiming to be bi, with the hopes I'd purify that godless first world bullshit out of her. But she was also vegan, so I guess I should have known better. Uninstall Tinder, by the way. Odds are you'll be guaranteed to get that category of lady that's just a first world brain rot hypocrite, who has more respect for a pride flag than any religious belief. Like, dead ass, we all know it's more controversial to diss the rainbow flag than it is to attack any religious group, with the exception of one of them that's backed by all the unhealthy fast food places that can be found to be the root of all of these problems, the type YouTube won't let you name off, as one of my videos got struck down over one brief jab sentence in a video that didn't even have them as the focus, a video about clothing black people decide to wear. Check out the uncensored version on Rumble, by the way. But anyway, I almost forgot about the fucking UK, where some of the worst parts of that degeneracy festers, where you have niggas just walking into houses without people being able to do shit legally, apparently, where the worst of the worst woke takes come from, like Resident Evil 5 being called racist just for taking place in Africa.
Oh yes, and don't forget their education system where psychiatrist Dr. Kate Godfrey Fawcett was ostracized, blacklisted, and is currently under investigation for the crime of criticizing the inclusion of LGBTP and other sexual material in kids' curriculum.
Tons of YouTubers roasted shit like that and that shitty Resident Evil 5 article, especially since this UK loser is saying this already debunked shit over a decade after the game. But none of those YouTubers had the balls to point out the pattern of where this writer was from. It's not the first time I dealt with some white, UK, ugly, balding, fragile, scrawny fuck misusing the word racist. I apologize to any rare-based UK citizens that have to deal with these ugly, incel, inbred byproducts that make your territory look like Earth's biggest punchline. But anyway, just look at their Prime Minister.
I want to marry Israel woman in life. Thank you so much. Please marry me, dear, bold and beautiful Israel woman. Thank you very much.
Now, back when the world made sense, your father in that time period probably would have taken that game away from a kid version of you had he saw you playing that shit in what's pretty much a kid's game. Nowadays, that logical course of action would not be made, sadly, by modern parents. You may even get the opposite with brain rot white moms encouraging it. Yeah, and I don't want to hear dumb obvious shit like, oh, you're not forced to play it, as if I was ever insinuating that someone was putting a gun to your head. But I will state that you are forced to play such a mission if you want 100% map completion and a platinum trophy, or if you want the Puerto Rico mile skin. Beyond dunking on Insomniac's Latinx pronouns that the overwhelming majority of Latinos don't fuck with, I never touched on Hispanic and Latino culture too much in my original video calling this shit out, since I will admit that it isn't my background. But we have a comment from a guy who is Puerto Rican who offers a very sympathetic assessment on this whole situation along with his multiple solid comments on my various Spidey videos. His comment reads, "As a Puerto Rican, I dislike that the flag suit is associated with the woke school, especially since Puerto Rico is very Christian."
Oh, there's no surprise there, especially considering how they try to enforce the Latinx label on Latinos despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of them oppose it. This type of telling others what's good for them rhetoric is what I like to call the Western supremacist mentality. It's one that assumes that other cultures built up off of centuries of history and common practices are all
backwards and primitive
for not submitting to the new normal, which really only started becoming that in the last few decades or so. What exactly gives the West the ability to decide on what's right and what's wrong? What should be normalized and what shouldn't be? African countries, for example, being threatened with sanctions that lead to poverty for simply refusing to comply with this new normal on a governmental level is beyond barbaric. The fact that the White House itself fully declared the spread of LGBTP as a foreign policy priority tells you all you need to know about their cultural imperialism, which we pay for with our tax dollars. In the memo, the US directed all agencies engaged abroad to ensure that United States diplomacy and foreign assistance promote and protect the human rights of the LGBTP community and to combat foreign governments' criminalization of it. Human rights include food, water, safety, and shelter. Everything else is absolutely subjective and up for debate, and not necessarily a right per se. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, the UN declared the right of a child to goon as a human right, and I'm not even kidding.
Not to mention them getting the flag wrong as a AAA studio that claims to care about this progressive shit when they fuck up shit like the flag. You know, most of these people working at Insomniac, such as their cuck writers, are fucking white. Not that I care about the ethnicity of the writers, but aren't these the people that want to rant about diversity? At this point, I guess I better clarify that I don't really care about people swinging the other way in the privacy of their own areas, or even in certain games, but those certain games are usually rated M, such as Mass Effect, Cyberpunk, and Baldur's Gate, on top of seeing that shit being optional for the most part, unlike Spider-Man 2, where it's not for the reasons of 100% completion as said before, and there's no way of knowing what mission you are going to get into with that game, Like, despite all the idiots trying to claim, oh, you just don't own a PS5. I, regrettably, have a Spider-Man themed PS5, which means I got this day one, and had no idea something like that would be in the game. Funnily enough, I did instinctually leave those shitty school campus missions for last, as I had a feeling the worst of this game's shoehorned progressive missions would be there, as I've been on a college campus where that dog shit is all over the place in the modern day. I ended up arguing with so many loathsome human drones, which made me realize that this is indeed the hive where the dumb white women drones are made. But anyway, what do you know? My instincts of the worst part of the game being there was correct to an even worse extent than I would have thought. I should have taken MJ's Farquaad face as enough of a red flag to skip that game, but hey, the views I got roasting it was worth it. Hopefully I get the PS5's money's worth with better games like a PS5 exclusive God of War game where Kratos doesn't get pinned under a rock that's as light as a fridge and actually gets 1v1 wins. I'm yapping at this point, but anyway, beyond the facts that Resikin is bringing to the table, I've seen this shit have an impact on kids in various ways, like in the original video calling out this progressive bullshit. I got tons of comments against me, as the video has a 59% like ratio. But most of these comments against me were fucking children based on the accounts I took quick ganders at. Like, why the hell were they so many children being invested enough to aggressively defend gay stuff being in a Spider-Man game? Seeing all those children in that comment section be indoctrinated into defending that shit before even hitting puberty made me sad as fuck. I've given a full video dedicated to this topic where I state that women don't look like this, the actress of MJ didn't look like this, and even if you name off the self-insert writer, that doesn't really matter given that she isn't the woman they hired. Most women are beautiful sights that men could aspire to be with. Most women look no lower than a 7 out of 10. Especially when they're in their 20s, as opposed to MJ being a 4 to 2 out of 10, that would cause one to ask,
why do you look 50 and you're 24?
What? What did you say? Go yourself, you piece of poor.
If you're going to lie to yourself and say this is normal, then you can't be trusted with anything important in life, and maybe the best suggestion I could give you is this quote.
Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should
I feel like they have the need to obsessively defend this game due to the fact that Insomniac might literally be the only piece of Spider-Man media in game format which they were ever exposed to. You've covered this before with your video about the older Spidey games not being preserved for modern consoles, which is probably intentional.
I was being called homophobic and a whole bunch of other similar insults, which they like to label me as, despite me not really hating people just for swinging that way so long as it's away from my church and children, as said before. I don't think that there's anything to celebrate when it comes to the places one puts their genitals, especially in a kid's game. Nobody gives me a flag or throws a parade for me if I slay some bussin' gaiats, so why the fuck do they get one? Oh, right, and I guess I better attend to the "oh, but actually" crowd that will say, but actually, it isn't a kid game, it's, rated T.
To that I reply, what the Sigma?
Fuck off with your gaslighting technicalities. You motherfuckers know damn well a vast majority of parents don't pay attention to ratings that aren't M. And you fuckers are trying to take advantage of that ignored teen rating in the most deceptive of ways. Hell, a smaller percentage of parents may not even pay attention to an M rating, given that a decent amount of kids still played Arkham Knight, which I don't really think deserved an M rating too much, or GTA as an even worse legitimate example. But the point is that Spider-Man is clearly a game that kids are going to play, as a lot of us did with the Activision games. All but 2 Activision Spidey games were rated teen, and yet a lot of us played them before the age of 10. It's an unwritten rule that teen ratings aren't taken seriously. I shouldn't even have to say this shit, but if I don't, I know some dumbin would have said this crap in the comments like the last video. Hell, they'll probably say this dumb shit still regardless of how much I address this dog shit in advance. I can't unprogram fucking bots.
Instead, with this video and the knowledge Joker and I have dropped, we seek to install a firewall program for those not yet completely corrupted by this virus of wokeness as a last stand for Spider-Man game kind. But seriously, what is the solution of all this? Should we go around attacking gay people for being gay or seek to even criminalize the behavior? No, of course not, that's silly. Gay people have existed and will always exist, that is not the problem here. Sadomasochists, more commonly known as those who are part of the BDSM community, have also always existed. That being said, they largely keep their bedroom practices in the bedroom, and even if they are open about it, for the most part they don't lobby to have such things included in the media or children's classrooms. People are free to do whatever they want in the comforts of their own homes, but sexual things in general, especially homosexuality, where science has proven it to be, in fact, a lifestyle choice rather than something that they cannot help, should not be promoted.
Yeah, and let's just say that we really needed to, because we've noticed this crap be worse within the modern Spidey fandom, and not for the reasons of toxicity, but more so the reasons of complacency with garbage media that has garbage politics, consume product shills that would go as far as to defend a flag that pretty much represents indoctrination and the cutting of genitals when it comes to underage kids, on top of hormone blockers that can cause irreversible damage. And yet no channel that focuses on Spidey has the balls to call that shit out, just because they like the movie as they decide to ignore it, like a consume product shill, or a cuck watching what he likes get fucked. As discussed in our Discord server by heavy hitters like our main mod Far Beyond Spider-Man, the intelligence of general Spidey fandom basically died 5-ish years after Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, when Activision stopped making Spider-Man games that didn't have such shoehorned progressive nonsense. You pretty much won't name another mainstream game with more progressive nonsense that's forced on the player. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I really suggest checking out this video that's fully dedicated to the progressive shoehorned nonsense within Insomniac Spider-Man 2, as opposed to this video that was more dedicated to taking down crap rebuttals like people trying to deny the correlation of odd media and children's behavior. But anyway, thanks for watching us kick the hornet's nest. Subscribe to show that common sense isn't too much of a minority.
Thank you for watching, and remember, stay woke.